The length of the wildfire season in the West has been extended by about 78 days over the last couple decades. The intensity of these wildfires as well has increased over fivefold.
Some debate how we've gotten here, but wildfires are just one sign our climate has indeed changed, and everyone is paying attention. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The potential for our coping capacity, or our ability to manage these threats, might be exceeded.
NASA.
Changes in the Arctic are not going to stay in the Arctic, so it certainly will have impacts going forward in the U.S. and other areas of the Northern Hemisphere.
The U.S. Navy.
Somewhere in the next, say, 15 years or so, we'll start seeing a few weeks out of each year in which there's basically no ice in the Arctic.
And even higher up.
There's a real high sense of awareness in the Department of Defense about the risks of climate change and especially on how we can, coming up with plans to mitigate the risks.
The threats are real. Tonight, the big changes we've seen right here in St. Louis, how some here have already taken upon themselves to find solutions, and how you yourself can be prepared. Good evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Cindy Pressler.
And I'm meteorologist Mike Roberts. The World Meteorological Organization says extreme weather is the face of changing climate.
Climate change and extreme weather are not about a distant future. Just a few weeks ago, a new report showed while climate change didn't cause last year's drought or Hurricane Sandy, it did make them worse.
Tonight, we are going to help you understand the connection between climate change and the recent patterns we are so clearly seeing. We start with meteorologist Scott Connell.
You don't usually expect tornadoes to touch down on New Year's Eve. It's supposed to be cold and icy, but December 31st, 2010 was anything but winter-like. 12 tornadoes, the strongest in EF3, hit Sunset Hills. 1 person was killed, 6 were injured. And that was just the beginning of what seems like a series of extreme weather patterns. 2011 brought a historic winter storm to the area from January 31st to February 2nd. Blizzard conditions shut down airports, closed parts of Interstate 44 and 70, dropped up to 22 inches of snow to the north, and mostly sleet in St. Louis. A late winter storm produced a tornado outbreak on February 28th to 29th, with 22 confirmed tornadoes and straight-line wind damage. April was the worst month, with a severe weather outbreak on the 19th and again on the 22nd. That was Good Friday. 5 confirmed tornadoes ripped paths through the St. Louis area. The longest cut a 21-mile path across St. Louis County to Madison County, Illinois, including Lambert Airport. The worst damage, rated EF4, occurring in Bridgeton. The amazing thing? No one was killed. That wasn't the case in Joplin, Missouri on May 22nd. A nearly mile-wide EF5 tornado killed over 150 people, the deadliest since 1947, and injured over 1,000. May 25th brought another severe weather outbreak with 2 tornadoes and large hail. Widespread wind damage was the result of a bow echo that moved through on June 27th.
The 2012 flash drought really begins in the winter of 2011-12.
We only picked up 6.3 inches of snow that winter. March, we had plenty of moisture. Well, in April, it all came to an end. And by May, 38% of the country was considered to be in drought. Look what happened by June. That number went all the way up to 56%.
And Cindy, it's astounding to think that by July, fully 2/3 of the United States, and then some, 63% of the U.S., is in a naturally occurring drought made worse by human-induced climate change. In 2012, there were $12 billion disasters in the United States. Ours, the drought, was second most expensive. Sandy was the most expensive.
And just this month, the American Meteorological Society released a report indicating that out of the 12 extreme weather events that were analyzed, at least half of them were found to have some connection to a human-induced climate change. 2013 began with above-average temperatures. 2 separate winter storms in February brought freezing rain, ice, and thunder snow to the area. We sure needed the moisture, and the pattern carried over into March, making it a wet month. Palm Sunday was historic. 12.4 inches of heavy, wet snow fell in St. Louis, and up to 16 inches in Hillsboro, Illinois. By April, the weather turned tornadic. On April 10th, 60 to 100 mile-per-hour winds and 3 tornadoes hit Bridgeton, Hazelwood, and Florissant. Several minor injuries were reported, but no one was killed. April 17th to the 18th brought flash flooding. One person was killed when she drove her car onto a flooded road in DeSoto. The cool spring spilled into June and July due to a stuck position of the jet stream, a pattern that looked like it belonged in spring or fall, not summer. What will the fall bring? Well, that remains to be seen. We need carbon. Life on the planet depends on it, but too much carbon can tip the Earth's delicate temperature balance. Scientists say we reached a critical tipping point this summer. Meteorologist Chester Lampkin shows us how.
For the first time ever, researchers at Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii measured 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. What does that 400 mean to you and me? It means both a little and a lot. First, let's explain the importance of carbon dioxide. It's a greenhouse gas, meaning that it helps to trap heat radiated from our sun. Without carbon dioxide, there would be no life on Earth. But there is a such thing as too much of a good thing. A lot of human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels, are adding tons of carbon to the atmosphere every day. In fact, we have more carbon dioxide in our air now than we've seen for thousands of years. How do we know this? We know by drilling into glacial ice and calibrating and analyzing layers of that ice in a process called ice coring. The deeper the ice layer, the farther back in time the ice record goes. We could chart how much carbon dioxide was around thousands of years ago. As we get closer to present day, there's a strong uptick in carbon dioxide levels. This coincides with the Industrial Revolution. And until the last 100 years, carbon levels had never been above 300 parts per million. Over the last 50 years, measurements have shown a steep rise in those levels, and finally, this year, for the first time, Mauna Loa registered 400 parts per million carbon dioxide. While the 400 parts per million is an arbitrary number, it does show you the magnitude of our greenhouse gas problem. We are entering territory never before seen in human history.
The 1995 Chicago heat wave is the measuring stick for all heat waves. We lost 700 lives. The projection is really amazing. Now, between 1970 and 1999, on balance, we had 1.5 of those kinds of Chicago-like heat waves per decade. But the projection is astounding. Looking ahead to the year 2100, it is possible that not 1.5 per decade, but 3 events like the one in Chicago could happen every single year. There is so much heat in the system already. This is what we have happening now. Heat waves are more frequent, cold periods less so. Ice and snow melt quicker and don't hang around. Heavy downpours occur twice as often, and we're going to see more of this. More and heavier downpours, more flooding, more property damage. Water systems will be strained. Travel disruptions will be more likely. Think of what just happened in Colorado. And we're expecting 3 to as much as 10 degrees warmer by the middle to the end of the century. More heat waves, more heat-related deaths, and a decrease in air quality.
So the EPA did a study recently. Let's take the state of Illinois. What would it look like and feel like by the middle of the century? Well, more like Arkansas looks and feels like today. And by the end of this century, oh my goodness, go all the way down to eastern Texas. That's what it looks like. That's what it feels like. One very real threat of climate change is the possibility of major cities and states in the Midwest just running out of water.
Columbia University researchers say our population is up almost 100% since the 1950s. We are using double the amount of water.
A small village in our own area ran out of water when more people moved in. Well, tonight, News Channel 5's Farah Fazal shows how a dilemma drove people to a new way of using water.
59 years ago, my parents moved here, and they were milking cows at that time, and we still milk cows today.
Forging a way forward on the farm.
You do what you have to do.
Is how John Marcotte survived 6 decades on his little piece of paradise. Green grass for his 65 cows grows over 120 acres in Greenville, Illinois, an hour from St. Louis. Between the buildings, is his livelihood. He and his family make a living on their dairy farm. The years got tougher when the water in their 4 wells started drying up.
When your cows don't have water, especially dairy cows, they don't produce milk.
Life on the farm changed in 1993.
There was first talk about a Bond-Madison water district coming into the area.
It wasn't just talk.
A group of homeowners and the village of Pocahontas were very short on water, and they had been steadily growing until it got to the point that they didn't have enough water to provide for everyone. They could not build a new house. They couldn't wash a car or fill a swimming pool.
Farmers, landowners, and the town people needed an answer. Sandy Kuhn and her husband were 2 of them.
Let's see if we can get the financing for this, put the water in the ground.
They convinced Southwestern Electric to help. Illinois American sold them fresh treated water from the Mississippi. Tractors were digging, pipes were going in, work was moving.
It did take 5 years from that first little meeting until water was actually flowing to someone's house.
The not-for-profit Bond-Madison Water Company was up and running.
Because we were such a small operation, it was kind of a one-man show.
Sandy and her husband did some of the legwork. She sent every one of the first 750 customers water bills from a small room in her house.
No more wells, I get city water, and they were excited.
Sandy and her small staff have multiplied their files of customers from their 1-room office in Pocahontas.
So we take these aerial maps and
400 miles of water mains now stretch across 8 villages and 15,000 customers.
Populations are growing, there's more need for water.
Today, all we do is turn the tap, and we've got water.
The water pipes run under the road in front of John Marcoute's farm. They are helping him raise healthier cows.
Our cows were giving more milk because they had quality water.
He's grown another generation of Marcoute's.
I don't know if our creamery would exist if we didn't have clean water.
His daughter Beth and her sister make cheese and sell it across St. Louis. They're making a living and living the legacy.
You respect the value of water.
The Marcoute's never take clean water for granted. They know it's their key to forging the way into the future.
Now, we can't say exactly what's going to happen with climate change and when it's going to happen, but we do know we will see more and heavier rains, more and stronger droughts, and our power grids and our infrastructure will be taxed like never before.
And there's a better chance you are going to be left on your own. There's a great saying, the first 72 are on you. That means you need enough food, water, money, medication, anything else to get you through at least 5 days on your own. Welcome back to the special half hour dedicated to understanding climate change and how it impacts us here in St. Louis. Joining us now to discuss the matter just a little further are 3 very special guests. Dr. Chuck Graves is an associate professor of meteorology at St. Louis University. Anu Hiddle, director of Hawaiian projects at Washington University. And our very good friend Julie Neiman, financial analyst at Smith Moore here in St. Louis. And Anu, in your area of expertise, which would be including sea level rise and so forth in Hawaii and also U.S. territories, why would that matter to us here in St. Louis? What does that mean to me?
Yeah, so they estimate that there are about 50 million people living in tropical islands worldwide. And many of these islands will see changes, either because the islands will be submerged or made uninhabitable by sea level seawater intrusion and lack of freshwater supplies. And for those 50 million people, well, it's probably not that many, but not all of them, but for many of them, this is going to be a problem. And they will be looking for other places to live, not because they want to, but because they have to. And I doubt that all 50 million will come here to St. Louis, but we will be called upon to respond in some way. Whether, and we've seen this before when natural disasters have happened in places like Haiti, and St. Louisans have gone to actually help. We've been called upon, and we have helped because we're a caring society. We will be called upon, whether militarily or medical or any other form. And so I think it's not a question of why should we care, but what can we do to be better prepared when this happens?
Julie, let me ask you about the financial sector. What are you seeing with your clients? Are they concerned? And if they're concerned, what are they doing in response?
Well, the biggest problem is everybody getting their arms around this. And of course, Wall Street, I don't care what they say, they're short-term oriented. Companies plan for the long term? Sure they do. They plan for next year's bonuses, and that's pretty much about it. So what they're looking at now is how can you both participate and avoid the risk in the industries. And there are tremendous risks associated with global climate warming, but there are also tremendous opportunities as well. So that's what everybody's focusing on now, is where do you go to deal with this in terms of your financial portfolio?
Is there an upside to climate change? I'm going to start with Chuck. Do you feel that there is an upside?
On several fronts. There will be locations where climate change and global warming will in fact provide an environment that's more favorable for humans. Another upside that I personally look at is it's brought it to the forefront. So the environment now is getting more attention, and people are concerned that in fact they can have an impact on what happens, and they start to act and recycle and do all things that are generally good for the planet anyway.
It's a bit like asking the question of, is there an upside to war? And I would say there are some people that benefit from war, but there are many people that don't. And I think that for those 50 million people who might need to find a different place, whose cultures and homelands may disappear, I don't think it would be easy to convince them that there is an upside.
Where do we go from here? What's the next step? We have to adapt to a changing climate. Your opinions on that, Julie?
Well, the question is adapting, because adapting means costs. The costs would have been actually somewhat manageable if we'd started 20 years ago when we first really got not serious about this, at least talking about it. Now the costs have risen absolutely geometrically. So anything that we're going to do is going to be quite costly. It's going to be politically unpopular, and it's going to be like pulling teeth across at least our population, if not the rest of the world. But it has to be done because the cost to the population is becoming immediate, both in terms of health care and availability of resources. So when do we start? We're starting now. I think the most immediate thing are going to be water resolution and air resolution, because those are two things that are affecting the population right now. So I would look for legislation coming in those two areas, and for the EPA really to be stepping up here.
You say we're talking about it, but maybe we're not quite serious about it yet.
When you have a cost with anything, it has to be passed equally to everybody. If you go into just one industry and slap them with a fine, for example, in oil and gas drilling, if you only hit the offenders, the large offenders, then you're going to have absolutely no good money coming in, and you're not going to have the incentive to change. So if you're going to say we're going to change drilling practices for offshore oil so that we don't have a lot of spills, change drilling practices for fracking so we don't have problems with water intrusion. It has to hit everybody equally so that they all incur the same cost. We have to get rid of subsidies for industries that make no sense at all. And I'm talking about one very specifically, is the renewable fuel area in terms of corn ethanol. That is the most costly way to try and clean up the air, whereas it should be going to our greater problem, food for everybody.
Okay, well, what can I do? I mean, these are huge problems. What can I do, just me, Mike, in St. Louis?
We make sure we recycle. We make sure that we communicate our efforts to recycle to our kids. I convince my kids that if you make it easy, you'll recycle. But if it's an effort that you have to do, and we tend to be lazy, we don't do it. So set yourself up so that recycling is an easy thing to do, and then you tend to do it.
We need to wake up. Everyone can do that. We can wake up and we can inform ourselves as to what are the issues, what is the debate, and what is the reality. And then we can decide for ourselves what's the course of action.
All right, Julie Neiman, Anu Hittel from Washington University, Dr. Chuck Graves from St. Louis University. Thank you so much for coming down and participating in our roundtable discussion. We'll be continuing this conversation online on our News Channel 5 Facebook page.
And you can join the discussion and ask us any questions right now. Have a great night.